The dropships moved like silent ghosts through the void of space, their dark, angular shapes stark against the backdrop of a swirling green and black planet. From orbit, the world looked deceptively alive. Thick, roiling clouds sped across its surface, and colossal storms pulsed with brilliant, silent flashes of light. The ship's scanners had already analyzed it, categorized it, and given it a name that sent a chill through even the most seasoned crew. Class-3 Deathworld. Inside the main transport, hundreds of cadets held their breath, waiting. They were a mosaic of the galaxy's youth, a collection of species from countless star systems. Some had shimmering scales that caught the dim cabin lights. Some were covered in thick fur, a testament to origins on icy worlds. Others had frail, slender bodies, evolved for planets with gentle gravity and calm skies. But despite their differences, they all shared one terrifying truth. This planet, the one growing larger in the view screens, was not made for life like theirs. Behind reinforced glass walls, the instructors stood like statues, their eyes scanning the biometric readouts of every single cadet. They watched heartbeats spike, respiration quicken, and sweat form on brows, scales, and exoskeletons. This was the final, brutal test of the Galactic Survival Academy. Officially, it was designated a planetary acclimation exercise, but unofficially, everyone knew its real purpose: to break the minds of the weak, to separate the survivors from the statistics. Many cadets would fail. Some would not leave this planet alive. A crisp, metallic voice echoed through the ship's compartments. Cadets, prepare for planetary drop. Survival time begins upon landing. The announcement was a switch, flipping the atmosphere from tense silence to palpable fear. The cold air seemed to crawl over their skin. A young insectoid cadet clicked its mandibles in a rising panic. A tall, graceful avian folded its wings so tightly around its body it looked like it was trying to disappear. Even the hardened reptilian warriors, usually stoic and proud, kept their eyes glued to the floor, their usual confidence gone. Everything about the planet below was wrong. Its gravity fluctuated without warning, pulling and pushing with unpredictable force. The atmospheric pressure shifted by the hour, threatening to crush lungs or cause bodies to rupture. The vibrant, beautiful plants were laced with deadly neurotoxins. The native animals were apex predators that hunted in coordinated packs. The storms, beautiful from orbit, were powerful enough to strip flesh from bone on the ground. The instructors watched the chaos building, expecting it, welcoming it. Then, the cameras panned to the human section, and the scene was different. They were louder. As the ship shuddered from atmospheric turbulence, one of the humans actually laughed. Another stretched his arms wide over his head, yawning as if he was just waking from a comfortable nap. A young woman was calmly adjusting the straps on her gear, a small, focused smile on her face. Finally, one of them said, his voice cutting through the nervous quiet, "Real ground." An alien cadet nearby, whose 3 eyes were wide with terror, stared at them in utter disbelief. You understand where we are?" It stammered, its voice shaking uncontrollably. The human who had stretched looked over at the planetary display, a screen filled with red warnings and grim data. He just nodded. Double quotes, "Yeah, rough place. Should be fun." The word hung in the air, alien and absurd. Before anyone could process it, the drop pods launched. There was no countdown, just a sudden, violent lurch. Metal screamed in protest as hundreds of individual coffins were fired toward the planet's surface. A cocoon of fire wrapped around each pod as it tore through the upper atmosphere. Some began to spin wildly out of control. Others simply vanished into the massive, churning storm clouds. Inside one pod, a 4-armed Jelkorian shrieked as alarms blared and red lights flashed. In another, a small mammalian cadet from a pacifist world was curled into a ball, praying to its ancestors. But inside the human pods, the comms channels were startlingly calm. "Brace for impact. Remember your training, people. Hey, don't forget the snacks." The first pod hit the ground with the force of an artillery shell, smashing into the dark, wet soil and snapping ancient trees like twigs. A second pod plunged into a murky body of water and sank without a trace. A third rolled down a steep, rocky hill, coming to a stop just inches from the edge of a sheer cliff. Across the landing zone, a symphony of panic erupted. Alien cadets crawled from their mangled pods, bleeding, disoriented, and shaking. Some couldn't even stand, their legs buckling under the crushing gravity. Others collapsed, gasping as the thick, nitrogen-heavy air burned their lungs. From the shadows of the dense forest, unseen things watched. The forest itself seemed to move. A single, piercing scream cut through the air as something unseen dragged a cadet into the bushes. High above in orbit, The instructors watched the live feeds, their faces impassive. Survival rate is dropping faster than projected, one officer noted, his tone clinical. Good, another replied without looking away from the screen. Fear teaches much faster than comfort. Then, the human pods began to open. One had landed in a small, wide clearing. The door hissed and then burst open, and 3 humans stepped out. They didn't run. They didn't scream. They stood there and looked around slowly, taking in the towering, alien trees, the thick, coiling vines, and the bruised, dark sky. One of the humans took a deep, deliberate breath. "Smells like rain and dirt," he said with a nod. "Not bad." Another knelt down, touching the ground, rubbing the dark soil between her fingers. "Good cover here. Plenty of wood for a fire." The third just looked up at the churning clouds. Storms coming in soon. None of them sounded afraid. From a wrecked pod nearby, an injured alien cadet crawled toward them. One of its limbs twisted at an unnatural angle. It's hunting us," the cadet cried, its voice filled with terror. "This world wants us dead." A human woman walked over and helped the cadet to its feet without a moment's hesitation. "Yeah," she said calmly, her voice steady. "Most places do." Soon, more humans began to arrive from nearby crash sites. But instead of running in panic, they gathered. They immediately began checking each other for injuries. They pooled their resources, sharing tools and supplies from their survival kits. One of them even managed to start a small, controlled fire using a broken piece of a pod and a plasma igniter. The instructors in the control room leaned closer to their screens, their professional detachment beginning to crack. "They're forming a base camp already?" One of them muttered in disbelief. Just then, in the distance, the trees began to shake violently. Something massive was on the move. The ground itself trembled with each heavy footstep. Flocks of alien birds burst from the canopy, screaming into the sky. The assembled alien cadets froze, paralyzed by pure terror. The ship's scanners locked onto the shape. It was huge, heavily armored, and moving incredibly fast. A native predator. One of the instructors allowed a cold, thin smile to cross his face. "All right," he said to the others. "Let's see how long their confidence lasts now." The creature burst from the trees with a deafening roar that shook the very air. It was a nightmare of evolution, with far too many teeth and eyes that reflected the dim light like polished mirrors. Its huge claws dug deep furrows into the ground as it charged toward the small group. The alien cadets scattered, running for their lives. The humans did not. They stood their ground, a solid line against the chaos. One human calmly picked up a jagged metal rod from the wreckage. Another armed a high-intensity flare. A third moved to stand in front of the injured alien, shielding them. "All right," one of the humans said, his voice still impossibly calm. "Let's not panic." The predator lowered its head and charged even faster, and the humans stepped forward to meet it. High above, a stunned silence filled the control room. This was the moment fear was supposed to take over, the point where discipline broke and instinct screamed to run. But instead, the humans just looked, ready. The planet had made its first move, and the humans were smiling. The creature stopped just a short distance from the group, and it was massive. Its body was a fortress of thick, interlocking plates, like natural armor forged in the planet's core. With every step, long, wicked claws dug deep into the soil. Hot, foul breath poured from its mouth, a sickening mix of blood and wet earth. The alien cadets froze, paralyzed by pure, primal fear. Some dropped their tools with a clatter that sounded deafening in the sudden silence. Others were simply unable to move at all, their bodies betraying them. One cadet whispered, his voice trembling, "We are dead." But the humans didn't run. One of them, a man, slowly raised a hand, palm open. "Easy, easy," he said, his voice calm and steady, as if he were speaking to a spooked animal back on his home world. The creature didn't care for soothing words. It let out a deafening roar and charged. For a split second, it seemed the cadet's prediction was about to come true. But at the last possible moment, the humans moved not in a chaotic panic, but with a strange, unnerving purpose. One human threw a flare, a perfect arc that ended right in the creature's face. A brilliant red light exploded, blinding the predator. It shrieked in pain and fury, violently turning its head away. At the same time, another human struck the ground hard with a metal rod. A loud, ringing clang echoed through the trees, a piercing sound that vibrated in the air. The predator stopped its charge, shaking its massive head, clearly confused and disoriented by the sensory assault. And then, the humans attacked. But they weren't trying to kill it, they were just trying to drive it away. They moved like a single organism, a blur of coordinated action. One human darted to the side, drawing its attention. Another stood guard over the fallen, injured cadets. A third watched the creature's every twitch, calling out warnings like a seasoned commander. Left, back, now. The creature, enraged, lunged again. But this time, it stepped right into a hidden hole. A deep depression in the ground created by the debris from their own landing pods. It stumbled, its immense weight working against it. It lost its balance and fell hard, crashing to the earth with a sound that shook the ground. That was the final straw. With another angry, frustrated roar, the predator scrambled back to its feet, turned, and fled back into the dense forest. Its retreat marked by shaking trees and snapping branches until it disappeared completely. Silence descended upon the clearing. The alien cadets stared, their wide eyes shifting between the empty forest and the humans. That thing kills soldiers, one cadet said softly, his voice filled with awe. You just scared it away. A human standing nearby simply shrugged. Big animal. Territorial. It didn't want to fight, it couldn't finish. Far above, in the sterile command center of the orbiting ship, the instructors were no longer relaxed. Replay that, one ordered, his voice tight. They watched the footage again, mesmerized. There was no fear, no chaos, just calm, efficient movement and flawless teamwork. This isn't normal, another instructor said, leaning closer to the screen. Increase the environmental pressure. Down on the planet's surface, the humans were already moving on. They gently pulled the injured alien cadets closer to the crackling fire. One human tore a strip from his own jacket, expertly wrapping it around a cadet's bleeding limb to staunch the flow. Another passed around a water canteen, sharing freely without even being asked. An alien cadet, looking up from his bandaged arm, asked in confusion, "Why are you helping us? This is a survival test." The human tending to him paused, looking genuinely puzzled by the question. Yeah, survival. That includes everyone, to the watching galaxy. That simple, selfless answer made no sense at all. Suddenly, the sky began to darken with unnatural speed. Thick, heavy clouds rolled in, swallowing the light. The wind picked up, howling as it bent trees and pulled at loose debris. A storm was coming, and it was coming fast. The alien cadets began to panic again. The rain here burns skin. One of them shouted, his voice high with terror. We need shelter. The humans reacted instantly. They moved fast, but not blindly. Their eyes scanned the landscape, assessing every option. They chose a patch of higher ground, instinctively knowing to avoid low-lying areas. Using wreckage from the pods, thick vines, and fallen wood, they began to construct a makeshift shelter with practiced efficiency. Over here, a human called out, pointing to a large rock formation. Good shield. As the first drops of rain fell, they hissed and sizzled when they hit the hot ground. It was acid rain. Some of the alien cadets cried out in pain as the burning drops touched their exposed skin. Instantly, the humans pulled them under the newly built cover. Stay inside, a human shouted over the rising wind. Don't touch the rain. The storm hit with its full, terrifying force. Rain poured from the sky like a waterfall. Lightning cracked so close it felt like the earth itself was splitting apart. The thunder shaking their very bones. The wind howled through the forest like a living, breathing monster. The alien cadets huddled together, shaking with fear and cold. But the humans remained alert. They worked to reinforce the shelter, blocking openings where the wind and rain tried to force their way in. One human stood at the edge of the shelter, his eyes focused, watching the storm with an intense concentration. This planet is trying to scare us, he said, a grim smile on his face. It's doing a good job. Another human, working beside him, replied, I've seen worse. High above, the ship's sensors showed dangerous spikes in temperature, atmospheric pressure, and toxicity levels. Any normal cadet group would be gone by now, an instructor said quietly, his voice laced with disbelief. But the humans, another replied, they're adapting, faster than we ever expected. Hours crawled by. Slowly, the storm began to weaken. The torrential rain softened to a drizzle, and the thunder rumbled farther and farther away. When the sky finally cleared, the forest was transformed. Broken branches littered the ground. The clearing was flooded, and new paths had been carved through the mud by the rushing water. The humans stepped out of the shelter first. Cautiously, they checked the area, listening, watching. The alien cadets followed behind them, hesitant and unsure. We survived, one of them whispered, as if saying it aloud might break the spell. A human nearby just nodded. So far. And that's when the ground trembled again. This wasn't like the predator's footsteps. This was different, deeper, stronger. The tremor rolled under their feet, a slow, powerful pulse from deep within the planet. Trees shook, Rocks slid down nearby slopes. In orbit, every sensor on the command deck lit up with alarms. "What is that?" an instructor demanded, his voice sharp. Scanners probed deep into the planet's crust, searching for the source. And then, the answer appeared on the main screen. A massive, ancient energy reading, originating from far below the surface. "This world isn't just dangerous," a scientist said, his voice trembling with a new kind of fear. "It's alive in ways we don't understand." On the surface, the humans felt it too. One of them crouched, pressing a hand flat against the damp earth. "Something big moved," she said, her voice low. And it wasn't that predator. The forest fell utterly silent. No birds, no insects, not even the whisper of the wind. A heavy, expectant quiet settled over them, and for the first time, even the humans felt a prickle of genuine unease. "All right," one said quietly, his eyes scanning the tree line. "That changes things." The alien cadets instinctively looked to the humans, expecting to see fear finally break their composure. But instead, they saw something else entirely. Focus. Preparation. A quiet, unyielding determination. Far below their feet, in the crushing darkness of the planet's heart, something ancient and powerful had just shifted in its long slumber, and the planet itself was preparing its next move. The silence was worse than the storm. No wind moved the trees. No insects made a sound. Even the distant jungle felt frozen, like it was holding its breath. The alien cadets stood close together, too afraid to speak. The humans noticed it too. "Quiet like this is never good," one of them said softly. Another nodded. "Something's changed." The ground trembled again, just a little this time, like a warning. Small stones rolled down nearby slopes. Water in shallow pools began to ripple with an unnatural rhythm. The alien cadets panicked. "This isn't normal seismic movement," one of them shouted, his voice cracking. "The planet is unstable." A human, calm and focused, checked a handheld scanner taken from the wreckage of their pod. "It's not random," she said, her eyes fixed on the display. "It feels timed, high above." In the safety of orbit, the instructors were no longer calm. "That energy reading is growing," a scientist reported, his voice tight. "Whatever is down there is waking up." Another officer turned from her console. "Can we still call this a training exercise?" No one answered. On the surface, the humans began to organize again. Their voices were low but firm, cutting through the rising fear. They moved the group farther uphill, away from the lowlands. They marked safe pots with what little they had. They assigned simple roles without shouting or showing any fear. "You," one human said to a tall, insectoid cadet, "watch the trees." She pointed to another, smaller alien. "You, stay near the injured." The alien cadets followed without question. Their fear was still there, but a new feeling was growing alongside it: trust. They trusted the humans. As they moved, the forest slowly came back to life, but it was wrong. Plants twisted as they grew, vines snapping upward like searching arms. Flowers opened with an audible pop, releasing clouds of iridescent, glowing spores. One of the alien cadets gasped in horror. "Those spores, they'll stop your heart." The humans reacted instantly. "Masks on," one shouted, already pulling a piece of cloth from his pack. They covered their mouths and faces using scavenged fabric and filters from the pod gear. They pulled the stunned alien cadets into cleaner air pockets, shielding them with their own bodies. A few seconds later, animals burst from the trees, running in a blind panic. Large ones, small ones, predators and prey, all fleeing together. "They're running," a human said, his eyes scanning the dense woods. From something deeper, the tremor hit again. This time, it wasn't a warning. Cracks opened in the ground behind them, wide and jagged. Dark steam rose from the fissures, carrying an intense heat and a strange smell, like superheated metal and ash. The alien cadets screamed. "We can't outrun the planet," one cried out, stumbling to his knees. A human grabbed his arm, pulling him to his feet. "We don't need to outrun it." He pointed toward a rocky ridge rising ahead of them. "We just need better ground." They reached the ridge just as another shockwave rolled through the forest. Trees fell into the cracks like toys. Entire sections of soil collapsed inward as if the planet itself was taking a great, ragged breath. From orbit, the instructors watched in horror. "This is beyond Class 3 disaster conditions," one of them said, his face pale. "We are losing control of the situation." Another instructor replied quietly, her eyes glued to the tactical display. "The humans are still moving." On the ridge, the humans secured the group. They used climbing ropes from their survival kits to create safety lines. They used their own bodies to block unstable paths. They marked safe zones with bright cloth and salvaged light sticks. The alien cadets stared in disbelief. their multiple eyes wide. "You've done this before?" one of them asked, his voice trembling. A human smiled faintly, wiping sweat from her brow. "Earth has earthquakes, volcanoes, floods. This feels familiar." In the orbital command center, that answer made several instructors go silent. They looked at each other, a dawning realization on their faces. Another tremor hit stronger than all the rest combined. A massive crack split the ground at the base of the ridge. An intense, angry red light glowed from deep inside the planet. A wave of heat washed over them, so powerful it felt like standing in front of an open furnace. Something moved far below, something slow, heavy, and impossibly ancient. The alien cadets fell to their knees, overcome by a primal terror. "This world was never meant to be tested," one whispered, his voice full of despair. "It was meant to be avoided." The humans felt fear now. It was a cold, sharp feeling in the pit of their stomachs. But it wasn't panic. For them, fear sharpened their senses. It made them more aware. They watched the ground. They listened to the sounds of the dying forest. They adapted. "Okay," one human said firmly, his voice cutting through the rising noise. "Whatever that is, we don't fight it directly." An alien cadet looked up, his face a mask of confusion. "Then what do we do?" The human's reply was simple, and yet it held the weight of 1,000 generations. "We survive it. Same as everything else." Suddenly, a massive, undefined shape pushed against the earth from below. The ground bulged upward, like skin stretched taut over a giant bone. The ridge they stood on groaned and shifted. Then, it stopped. The silence returned, more profound and terrifying than before. Every heart pounded in the sudden quiet. Slowly, the ground sank back into place. Nothing emerged. Not yet. High above, warning lights flashed across every console in the control room. "That was a probe," a scientist said, his voice shaking with terror. "It didn't fully wake. It was checking." An academy officer spun in his chair. "Checking for what?" The scientist swallowed hard. "For threats." On the surface, the humans felt it too. A psychic chill that had nothing to do with the air temperature. "That thing noticed us," one human said quietly. The alien cadets, already on the edge, looked ready to break. One collapsed, burying his face in his hands and crying. "We are not soldiers. We are students." A human knelt beside them, her expression surprisingly gentle. "So are we." The cadet looked up, tears streaming down his face. "But you're not afraid." The human paused, considering her words. "We are," she admitted softly. "We just don't let fear decide for us." That moment changed everything. It was like a switch had been flipped. The alien cadets stood up a little taller. They wiped their faces. They looked at the humans not as strange, primitive creatures, but as leaders. The planet shook one last time, a final shudder, then grew still. Night began to fall with an unnatural speed. The sky darkened into deep purples and blacks. Strange, unfamiliar stars appeared between fast-moving clouds. The temperature dropped sharply, a biting cold seeping into their bones. And the humans, without missing a beat, prepared again. They gathered materials to build heat sources. They organized watch schedules. They pulled everyone in close, forming a tight, defensive circle. Far beneath them, in the planet's core, something ancient and powerful opened an eye. And far above, in the sterile comfort of their ship, the Galactic Academy finally realized the truth. This was no longer a test. This was a first contact with the kind of species that does not break. Night fell like a final curtain over the Class-3 Deathworld. The sky was a heavy, dark canvas, punctured by strange stars and streaked with fast-moving clouds. A chilling silence had settled over the forest. No insects chirped. No animals rustled. It felt as if even the wind was holding its breath, too afraid to move. A group of alien cadets huddled together, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. This world wasn't just dangerous, it was sentient. It was watching them. The human cadets felt it too, a primal instinct screaming that something was wrong. The very ground beneath their feet began to vibrate softly, like the slow, deep heartbeat of something massive buried far below. One of the humans spoke in a low, tense whisper. "This planet, it isn't trying to kill us anymore." Another one nodded, his eyes scanning the oppressive darkness. "No, it's judging us." High above, in the sterile comfort of the Galactic Academy control room, the initial confidence had evaporated, replaced by rising panic. Instructors frantically pulled up old, classified files. Forbidden data, long buried, flashed across the main screens. Finally, a senior scientist, his face pale, spoke the terrifying truth. "This world was never meant to be a training ground," he said, his voice barely a tremor. Every head in the room snapped towards him. "It is not just a death world. He paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. It is a containment world. Something ancient, something powerful enough to destroy entire fleets, lives beneath its surface. The planet doesn't react to weapons. It reacts to behavior. A heavy silence filled the control room. The scientist added softly, and fear makes it violent. Down on the planet's surface, his words proved prophetic. The ground split open, not with explosive force, but with a slow, deliberate tear. A deep, angry red glow pulsed from the chasm, casting waves of heat that rolled across the ridge where the cadets stood. The sheer terror was too much for some. Several alien cadets simply collapsed, their minds overwhelmed. Then came the pressure. It wasn't pain, it wasn't a sound, it was a presence, an immense consciousness that pressed into their minds like a suffocating memory. Visions, not their own, flashed through their thoughts, worlds burning under red skies, stars winking out of existence, entire civilizations reduced to dust. The alien cadets screamed, clutching their heads in agony. The humans staggered, their faces grim, but they remained on their feet. One human cadet, a young man named Elias, took a slow, deliberate step forward, placing himself between the terrified group and the glowing rift in the earth. He raised his hands, palms open, where the world could see. His voice was steady, cutting through the chaos. "We're not here to fight," he said calmly. "We just want to live." The ground trembled once more, but the crushing mental pressure eased, just slightly. It was enough. Encouraged, the humans shifted their strategy entirely. They didn't raise their weapons. They didn't shout or run. Instead, they began to systematically lower their lights, consciously slowing their breathing, and gently guiding the panicking alien cadets to do the same. Slow breaths. Another human, a woman named Lena, instructed, her voice a soothing anchor in the storm of fear. "Panicking only makes things worse. We have to show it we aren't a threat." And then, something incredible happened. The jagged cracks in the ground began to knit themselves shut. The ominous red glow faded, retreating back into the planet's depths. The ancient, oppressive presence pulled back, receding from their minds. From orbit, the instructors stared at their monitors in stunned disbelief. "They're not resisting it," one of them whispered, eyes wide. "They're calming it." The commander, galvanized into action, barked an order. "End the test. Extract everyone, now." But before the extraction ships could even begin their descent, the humans did something utterly unexpected. They waited. They didn't scramble for the extraction zone. They stood perfectly still, a small island of calm, until the planet had fully settled, until the faint, familiar sounds of the forest began to whisper back to life. Only then did they signal that they were ready. The senior scientist watched, a look of awe on his face. "This is unbelievable. They didn't conquer the Deathworld." "No," the commander replied, his voice filled with a newfound respect. "They adapted to it." Extraction ships descended through the breaking clouds, their searchlights cutting through the gloom. The cadets were lifted into the sky, one by one. Many of the aliens were crying with relief, their bodies still shaking from the ordeal. As the last human was lifted from the surface, the planet below became completely, peacefully silent. Deep beneath the crust, the ancient entity, soothed by an unprecedented response, returned to its long slumber. Back aboard the Academy ship, the medical bay was a flurry of activity. The alien cadets were suffering from deep psychological trauma. Many couldn't stop shaking, their minds replaying the horrific visions. The humans, by contrast, were exhausted, physically and mentally drained, but they were stable. Later, after the chaos had subsided, one of the alien cadets, a young Saurian with scales still pale from fear, finally asked the question on everyone's mind. He approached Elias, his voice still shaky. How did you stay so calm? That thing, that world, it nearly destroyed us." Elias thought for a moment, a weary but kind smile on his face. "Where we come from, you learn a hard lesson early on. Panic kills faster than any danger ever could. So we practice. We train. We learn not to let fear make our decisions for us." The incident prompted an emergency session of the Galactic Council. They reviewed everything: the instructors' logs, the cadets' biomonitor readings, the forbidden data on the containment world, and the humans' unorthodox but successful response. Then, the main display screen shifted, showing a new planet. Earth. The image was a montage of chaos, furious hurricanes, continents cracking apart from earthquakes, volcanoes spewing ash into the sky. It showed vicious predators and microscopic diseases. It was, by all galactic standards, a complete nightmare, a death world where life somehow persisted. Day after day, the Council reached a swift and unanimous decision that would alter the course of galactic history. Earth was reclassified. It was no longer a standard habitable world. It was now designated a Class-3 Deathworld, a category previously considered purely theoretical, and humans were given a new label, Extreme Adaptive Species. When reporters later asked the human cadets to describe the harrowing mission, one of them, Lena, just laughed. "It was rough, I won't lie," she said honestly, "but it mostly felt like a really tough camping trip." Another one chimed in, a wide grin spreading across his face. "Yeah, basically a fun little getaway." That simple, almost flippant statement, a fun getaway, spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Military strategists scrapped their war plans. Exploration guilds rerouted their star charts. Diplomats frantically rewrote their first contact protocols. The logic was simple and terrifying. If humans treated a mind-breaking, planet-sized nightmare as a vacation, then no one in their right mind ever wanted to see what humans considered a war. Far away, on the now peaceful Class-3 world, the ground rested. The ancient entity slept, and for the first time in millennia, its dreams were not of violence and fear. It dreamed of the strange, quiet species that did not scream, did not run, and did not attack. It dreamed of calm, and the galaxy learned one final, crucial lesson. Never, ever design a world to break humans, because they just might enjoy it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.